Should Aussie telcos be forced to reveal broadband speeds or actually fix the broadband problems?
And would you take to the skies in an autonomous drone?
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel.
Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined by a man who, unlike Guns N' Roses, does know the difference between Melbourne and Sydney, Adam Turner. I'm entirely outnumbered by Melburnians this week, as we're also once again joined by Macworld Australia editor Anthony Caruana. Anthony, welcome back.
Thanks, guys.
Adam, what's new in tech?
NBN head honcho Bill Morrow copped a lot of flack recently for suggesting that Australians simply aren't interested in gigabit broadband. Although, to be fair, his comments were slightly taken out of context as part of a global discussion on broadband take-up. Morrow contends that users aren't saturating a gigabit service anywhere on the planet, and while the option has been open for a while, no ISPs have stepped up to offer this level of gigabit plan on a consumer level.
Qantas has announced that from this month on selected domestic flights, customers will be able to access free in-flight Wi-Fi, including the ability to stream Netflix, Spotify and Foxtel. The backhaul for the service will come from unused capacity on the NBN SkyMuster satellites, with Qantas planning to roll the service out to the rest of its domestic fleet during the year.
Speaking of satellite, if you're on NBN's interim satellite service, you're about to get kicked off it. The cut-off date is looming. It's going to be decommissioned on February 28. So if that sounds like you need to make the switch over to the SkyMuster service.
Amidst the hype for the upcoming Mobile World Congress, Nokia, or to be strictly accurate, HMD Global, the company that's licensed the Nokia name for handsets, has made waves by announcing the return of the iconic, nearly indestructible Nokia 3310. No word yet on when we'll actually see it down under, or indeed if your snake skills are still up to par after so many years.
So, Alex, Qantas is talking about Netflix in the skies. Pretty exciting stuff.
Well, potentially, yeah. I mean, if you've ever used in-flight internet, you're probably aware that you generally charged a fortune for something that feels like dial-up if you're lucky. But Qantas reckon they've cracked it, that they're able to use spare capacity on the SkyMuster satellites across planes, which obviously are moving very, very fast and are substantially closer to the SkyMuster satellites than the people who are actually using the SkyMuster satellites, to provide a quality of service such that they can do streaming across Netflix, Spotify and Foxtel. And the idea is that if you've got an existing Netflix or Spotify account, you just log in. If you don't, you sign up for a trial. For Foxtel, they're being surprisingly generous for Foxtel. They're offering 3 days every time you fly, which means if you go away for a weekend, if you flew over to Perth or something like that, you could actually have stuff the whole time you were there, presuming you had other Wi-Fi services. This, of course, all presumes that the Wi-Fi actually holds up.
Anthony, you spend a bit of time in the air. You're interested in Netflix? You want to join the Netflix High Club?
Yeah, well, it'll be the all-new Mile High Club, I guess, is that you can watch your favourite movies while flying through the sky. Look, it's kind of interesting, but I'm pretty fussy about what I watch. And the other thing is that, particularly on long-haul international flights, the variety of movies that are available and TV shows as well, it's pretty good. I mean, you get stuff that's near new release. TV shows, you can easily binge a whole season of whatever you like to watch.
This is domestic only for the moment. They've said they're going to investigate what they can do for international, but for right now it's domestic, and I presume that's a technical limitation of the way the SkyMuster satellites work, that they don't really want SkyMuster beaming good quality internet into India per se. It's meant to be pointed at Australia.
Yeah, and look, even for domestic flights, the longest domestic flight we've got is probably the Sydney, Brisbane or Melbourne across to Perth, and it's only a 4-hour or so flight. There's a good piece of that flight where you're not allowed to have your laptop open anyway, which is about half an hour at each end. So you're only talking about maybe 2 or 3 hours. And to be honest, most of us can
You've
carry
heard of these
movie.
things called tablets?
Yeah,
you can have a tablet going the whole time.
Yeah, but still, it's only 1 or 2 movies, and most of us have got tablets or laptops that can hold 1 or 2 movies or 5 episodes of a TV show pretty easily.
And now Netflix has offline access. Spotify's had offline access for a long time. It's on the cards for Foxtel. They're already doing it for their kids app. So if you've already got those services, you've got to wonder how relevant it is, although most people aren't that organised. It's not till you get on the plane and sit down and think, oh crap, I should have downloaded those 3 episodes of Daredevil. So I can see how it will be useful for those of us that maybe aren't as organised as we should be.
I think the ulterior motive is that Qantas probably just can fit out planes without screens and without audio systems and stuff. So you bring your own, and they can outfit a plane a little bit more cheaply.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, it's an interesting play for Qantas because they actually already do in-flight on a bunch of their planes for domestic flights. They do in-flight streaming to tablet via their Qantas Entertainment app. They kind of do something along these lines already. I suppose the other problem with this is it's not just Netflix, Foxtel, Spotify. It's in-flight internet, which means if you're flying, you can't actually escape your email. You can't escape the office. And I suppose you can't escape that person in seat 57B having a noisy Skype call when you're on a red-eye flight from Perth. That might suck, actually.
Are they going to allow VoIP services like Skype through the service, or are they going to block those? I know some in-flight internet services in the US don't allow chat like FaceTime or VoIP services.
Unless they block VPNs, I don't know how they're going to stop it.
Yeah, and I with the greatest of respect to flight crews everywhere, my experience with any kind of technical issue with the entertainment systems has usually been that they don't know or aren't even authorised to change things or make access. So I just don't think they're going to stop people. The other two kind of issues, I guess, that fly into my head is for Foxtel. Outside of sport, the most popular thing on Foxtel by a country mile is Game of Thrones. I'm not sure if I'm flying with my family, I want to be sitting next to someone who's watching Game of Thrones. It's not exactly family-friendly entertainment.
But that could already happen, though. They could be watching it through some other means.
That is true and fair. The other thing, though, of course, is they're using spare capacity on Sky Muster, and as you mentioned in the news, they're shifting everyone off the interim satellites. Bye-bye, terrible interim satellites. Hello, newer and presumably fancier and better Sky Muster. But my brain kind of says, well, hang on, if you've got more capacity than you need, I mean, that's great, it gives you room to grow, I suppose. At the same time, why aren't you just serving faster to those people on the ground?
Give it to the poor bastards on the ground.
Yeah. Look, I've got a few friends that are on Sky Muster, on various different Sky Muster services. And for most of them, what they've been coming off is using 3G or 4G cellular connections, and then which cost them a fortune and gave them very little download traffic. So I knew people that were paying close to $200 a month for maybe 10 or 15 gigs of data. Ooh. Suddenly, they've got $70 and they're able to get 30 or 40 gigs. So they think they're in a good place. But relative to how the rest of us are in the city, where we're getting 500 or a terabyte for around those prices, I think this is why the Sky Muster's got a bit of spare capacity, is because people are coming off a very low base and aren't actually taking on the really big data plans. And in fact, looking at some of the data plans that are available, $200 a month from one of the providers gets you 60 gigs of anytime traffic and 90 gigs of off-peak. So it's 150 gigs with 2/3 of it restricted as to when you can use it, and that's still $200 a month. So my suspicion is that on the fastest, biggest plans, there's not that many people actually using them in the country because of the costs.
Yeah, and I mean, shifting to that kind of peak off-peak thing, feels like it's very 15 years ago, which is a beautiful segue into the other bit of news that we had, which was the return of the Nokia 3310. Are we excited for a really old phone?
I think cockroaches all over the country that are going to survive the nuclear apocalypse now have a phone that will last with them.
Yes.
Surely they already had a phone that would last with them. There'll just be more of them.
Well, I think they've missed their window in Australia, though, because we've just had the 2G. We're in the middle of the 2G shutdown. I think Optus goes off in April and Vodafone in September off the top of my head, and Telstra went off in December. If these phones had been around 12 months ago, they might have sold a shed load more of them.
They haven't really said what they're doing in terms of modernising these phones. I would be very surprised just from an available chipset point of view. Oh, no. I would be very surprised just from an available chipset point of view if they were 2G only, because it'd be fairly hard to source that chip level versus getting even a really, really cheap, and they will be really cheap, 3G and possibly even 4G capable chip to throw in them.
Yeah, look, I think there's actually a market for very simple... I heard someone call them dumb phones, but I think that the industry calls them feature phones. So make of that what you will.
Nanophones is the term people like to use.
Okay.
It might be a bit ageist and sexist, but the phone my nana used to use.
But there's I think there's a huge market for them. I was speaking to someone today who's got a child who's got a disability, and a simple phone with a simple keypad is actually exactly what they're looking for, and find quite hard to buy these days.
But, well, they really shouldn't, because the reality is, I did some research and wrote a piece on this during the week. There's not a ton of them, to be fair, and to be honest, for the same kind of money, you can get a simple, cheap Android if you like touchscreen, but I totally take your point that there are some people for whom a touchscreen is not a suitable alternative. But there are a ton of cheap, simple little phones, with due disclosure in mind. An awful lot of them are actually made by this show's sponsor, but that's beside the point I'm trying to make. There are an awful lot of them across the major carriers as prepaid phones. You spend $30-40 and you've got one. Relaunching the 3310 has this lovely kind of ironic hipster thing to it, and I wonder if it's not just a big PR stunt for the other phones that they're launching under the Nokia branding, and that they might say, oh yeah, look, we're only making 1,000 of these and they'll be special editions. Because I just can't see a huge worldwide market, even in those developing countries where there is a demand for a slightly longer battery life phone, or there isn't the financial level to support premium phones. That's fine. But they're already being served. There are already insanely low-cost Androids out there that serve that kind of market, including models that do, in fact, use physical keypads.
I'm actually really hopeful that they do only release 1,000 of them in their limited editions, because I buy a whole bunch of them and then sell them down in Brunswick to the hipsters.
And you know where they'll be sold online? Through EB Games and Target, and you'll never ever bloody get one.
That's true.
So, Adam, I don't think I've ever met anyone who's been 100% happy with their broadband service in Australia all of the time. And the ACCC's had something to say about this to try and make people feel a bit happy, but I understand you're not too happy about what they're saying, yeah?
I just think, as usual for the ACCC, they're going about it backwards. The ACCC's big push, they're saying that people are confused about broadband because you don't get what you pay for. You sign up for, we'll say, a 50 meg plan, and sometimes you get 50 meg, sometimes you get 5 meg, and people don't know what they're getting. So the ACCC solution is that internet service providers should be forced to give you a realistic explanation of the real world speeds that you're going to get. And if they mention any particular apps and services, they have to give you a real world understanding of how those apps will perform. Now, to me, this is a textbook, how long is a piece of string? Alex, you're on cable that just has a snooze every day in the afternoon when the kids come home from school. I've been on terrible DSL that comes and goes depending on what's happening with the rain. No one can give you an idea, but part of the problem is the line running to your house. And part of the problem is that your ISP might be a bit stingy on your back end. They might be making you forcing you to share your connection with too many other people, not enough backhaul, the contention ratio is not right. These are things they can fix. But
isn't
instead
the point,
of the ACCC saying to them, make it better, all they're saying is you just have to admit how bad it is. You don't have to fix the roads, you just have to put up a sign that says terrible roads ahead, and that will make it okay.
But isn't the point then that you can compare the guys who do have terrible backhaul? And I agree, there's always going to be variability to this stuff. And some of that is actually, I think, to be fair, beyond the ISP's control. But there's always going to be variability. But isn't the point that you can then say, right, well, this premium tier ISP says that its average speeds are 70, and this really cheap as chips ISP says that its average speed is 30, because they're saving on the backhaul. Like, this is how they do it. So that you can then go, right, well, my odds are better with these guys. Isn't that actually a net gain? I get what you're saying. Broadband should be better, but isn't that a better thing? In a perfect
world, yes, if those ISPs gave you real answers. But do you really think they're going to give us real answers? They're going to fudge it as much as they can. They're going to say things like up to 50 or between 25 and 50, and they're all going to say pretty much the same thing, because they don't know how far away you are from the exchange. They don't know what the congestion is like in your neighborhood. So they will all give you a ballpark figure that will say, okay, we'll stop saying you're going to get 50. Instead, we'll say you'll get somewhere between 20 and 40. You will not get honest answers from them.
I moved house about 18 months ago, and one of the key selection criteria for the place that I chose was access to good broadband.
Yeah.
So given the part of the city that I wanted to live in, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to get NBN because that was off the map. You know, it used to be on the plan and then it disappeared off the plan when the government changed and all that stuff.
Welcome to my world.
Yes. So, but what I found was when I was looking at, I had the two options I had were Telstra cable or a whole slew of different HFC, ADSL services.
Yeah.
So when I looked at the ADSL services, I discovered they're all coming out of the same exchange, and that exchange had been designated as a rural exchange, even though I only live about 30 kilometres out of the centre of Melbourne. And you know how well rural customers are treated by our ISPs and telcos around the country. Mm-hmm. So it kind of left me with only one option. But what was interesting was there were crowdsourced bits of data out there that were able to give me realistic information about what performance I could expect in my area from the various DSL services. And even though they were designated as DSL2, DSL plus and all this sort of stuff, and they were talking about 22 to 25 megabits per second as the maximum potential speed, when I looked at the crowdsourced data, most people were getting between 0 and 2.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Which is not broadband, it's not dial-up.
But do you trust the ISPs to be that honest?
Well, I think at some point they're going to get held to account if they're not. So if an ISP, for example, I had some issues with my Telstra cable, and that was designated as a 30 meg service. And at one point I was struggling to get 10 or 12 meg consistently. So it wasn't like I was getting peaks and troughs. I was just permanently in a trough. And they sent a tech out and we had a look, and he actually, to the tech's credit, gave me his personal mobile number so that I could call him in case I had any further issues. But he basically replaced all the cable all the way back out to the street. So I live in a block of units where the cable's been dragged through to each unit in the block already. So I've ended up with a reliable 30 meg connection. But I moved 5 kilometres and dropped from a reliable 100 meg connection or 80 meg connection.
Then at the same time, there's no way that the ISP could have known that either. So there's no way they could have given you an honest answer as to what you were going to get.
I disagree. I think
too many
they can
variables.
know. I think they can know. I think they may choose not to know, but I think they can know.
Even if they can know, I don't trust them to give us an honest answer.
I think the other aspect to this, though, is the ACCC stepping in and saying, hey, this is a problem. It's usually their way of kind of gently nudging people to do the right thing before they go to the next step.
Yeah, but these are the people who are surprised when the price of petrol goes up before a long weekend. That's how much faith I have in the ACCC. They're still genuinely surprised when the price of petrol goes up before Easter.
For once, I think you're the more. For once, Adam, I think you're the more cynical of the pair of us, and we should mark this occasion on a calendar. No, what I'm more thinking around is the ACCC has come down fairly heavily on certain marketing practices from ISPs. Unlimited being the classic example. You've got to be really careful about how you use the word unlimited. Yeah,
unlimited and everywhere, the two danger words.
So the ACCC is saying, hey, look, speed is an issue. Is I think they're kind of nudged to say, yeah, look, sort yourselves out or we will or could take it further. Now, I agree. There are instances in which they are very much a toothless tiger. But I honestly think this is a reasonable first step. Is it going to solve every possible broadband speed problem you're ever going to have? No, but I don't think any ISP could. I think I agree with Anthony. I think they could know and probably do know more about their general network usage and patterns and things like that. And part of the problem, of course, for the end consumer is that all too often when you phone up to complain, you're actually dealing with a call centre which is not particularly tied into technical operations, is not particularly well served to deal with that level of query, which is a more high-end tech query. An awful lot of people calling those centres admittedly don't know how to plug things in and need very basic levels of help, and they can handle that, but not much more. Certainly in my experience, when I've already done isolation tests, when I've already done everything I could possibly do because I'd rather not call tech support, I still get taken through the exact same things that I've already done, and it's super frustrating if you know what you're doing.
That is the benefit of being with a good ISP. I was with Internode for a long time, and regular listeners will know that I managed to get onto Telstra cable last year in my street, but that meant I have to be with Telstra. Now, I haven't really had to deal with them much in terms of tech support yet, but Internode was fantastic because I would ring them up in the middle of the night and I would spend 30 seconds explaining to him, this is what's happened, this is what I've done, and straight away that it would click. Okay, this guy knows what he's talking about, so they wouldn't make me go through those stupid steps. They would acknowledge that I had half a brain. I'm sure they were ready for people who didn't, but they were very happy to put, chapter 1 of the book aside, let's talk tech. As soon as you go for a more mainstream ISP, you're going to go through more of that experience no matter how much you know when you call them.
See, well, anecdotally, from what I hear, Internode, since the TPG takeover of IONET, who, of course, owned Internode, things have not gone well. So I hear. But the big, look, you're right. I mean, the big mainstream telcos, I think everyone's got an ISP tech support horror story. Having something where you can say, right, well, this says that this should do between these figures, even at a simple level, gives you something to go to the TIO with. If you're not getting that consistently, even if they say, oh, you'll get 20 to 60 meg, yes, that gives you a huge kind of range to speak of. But if you're getting Anthony's 2 meg consistently, and you can point to them saying, well, you said I would get this range, you've got a nice case for then jumping ISPs, perhaps getting yourself onto a service that can supply the level that you want. And obviously, ISPs don't want to lose customers, so it's in their interests to deliver what they say they're going to deliver, especially with the ACCC breathing down their necks.
And if you're playing along at home, the acronym to memorise out of that is TIO, Telecommunications Industry Ombudsman. You mention that when you're on the phone with your telco complaining about things, and suddenly they will be a hell of a lot more helpful. So, Alex, where's my flying car?
Your flying car is in Dubai. It's there. And for years and years and years, of course, flying cars have been the stuff of science fiction. You know, Marty McFly had a flying DeLorean in Back to the Future 2. Inspector Gadget could fly because a helicopter came out of his head. It's been that long promise of, oh my God, we will have flying cars and all of our traffic jam problems will be over, because if you drive, and I drive in Sydney as little as I can, but I still have to drive. Sorry, Melbourne, worse, hook turns. Don't get me started. But leaving that argument aside, you've probably been stuck behind someone and thought, God, if I could just hop over them, everything would be brilliant. It probably wouldn't. You'd probably just be stuck behind the next car in the queue. But if you could fly over them, well, that'd be awesome. Dubai...
Right up until the point you died in a fiery crash.
Sorry,
please continue.
We'll get to that. We'll kill you in a fiery crash if it's the last thing I do, Adam. But and it probably would be, I suppose.
Yes.
So it's been announced that in Dubai, they're going to trial some autonomous electric commuter vehicles. They're basically little flying cars. Except they're not cars. They're more like little flying helicopters or quadricopters, if you will. Completely autonomous, so you're not actually piloting them. You just get in, you press a button to say, right, I want to go here or there within Dubai, and it flies you there.
There is nothing in that concept that doesn't scare the crap out of me.
This, I think, is one of the big problems with autonomous vehicles generally. Most people are a little bit wary about the idea of autonomous cars, although by now there have to be millions of hours, I would imagine, of autonomous vehicle testing. I mean, both the big car companies and obviously Google's mapping cars are autonomous. There have been autonomous truck deliveries in the States. Hundreds of millions and millions of hours have been put into that. I was thinking about this because I was thinking, well, okay, so the drones are a little bit less tested. Well, actually, no, they're not. It's just that the use of autonomous drones up until now has largely been to kill people, because that's a military application. Tons of autonomous drones dropping tons of bombs on unsuspecting civilians.
And that kind of habit can be hard to break.
But the good news is they're testing in Dubai, and really, once you get past about 3 cities, isn't the place just a big desert and there's nothing to crash into anyway?
Well, you're not going to
There's a hell of a lot of tall buildings, though.
Yeah, but still, that's a good landing spot.
You're not going to get past Dubai itself, though. This is the other thing. They're fully electric vehicles. They're selling them as this green concept, which I like the idea of. You know, I'm a bit of a greenie. But as a result, because the one issue with any electric vehicle is that ratio of battery weight to mobility, because if you throw too many batteries into an electric car, you can go quite a lot further, but you go quite a lot slower. It's even worse, obviously, with something that has to fly, because you've got to provide lift. So the suggested range for this thing is only about 30k. They are looking at it as a commuter vehicle. And honestly, at this stage, I think also as a bit of a stunt, because Dubai has a lot of these things, you know, world's tallest building and floating islands and lots and lots of stuff to draw in the tourists. This is not exactly necessarily a tourist play, but it's certainly a bit of showing off. It's like the Shanghai Maglev. It's the, we were first with this, and maybe in 5 to 10 years' time, this will be a bit of a relic, and we'll all be getting around in flying vehicles if we're willing to get into them. And this is leading in to you dying in a horrible fiery crash, Adam, because it comes down to that thing of, would you be willing, if you happen to be in Dubai, and July is the rough time frame when they're talking about making these things available, would you be willing, if you happen to be in Dubai and someone said, hey, I've got a ticket for this autonomous vehicle and you can take it for a trip, would you get in?
No, to be honest, it sounds like more of a Shelbyville idea to me. the nerd in me, the tech in me, the journalist in me would say, yeah, absolutely. And then the rest of you would slap myself in the face.
I think Mrs. Turner would slap you in the face first.
Yeah, I think Mrs. Turner would slap me in the face too. I would, but I would be terrified.
Terrified's okay.
As long as you're not the next person in the pod, I guess. Yeah.
Well, possibly, but then again, I'd always make sure you go
self-cleaning
first.
as well. Yeah.
As long as you go first, I think I'd check that it was okay.
You just run a hose over it. It'll be fine.
Look, I only just got a Roomba, so I mean that's my first step towards the Jetsons. The flying cars.
And would you put your life in its hands, though?
Well, not quite. I'm still working out how to actually clean the Roomba after it's cleaned everything else, because I don't want to do any cleaning.
So you haven't tried to get it to drive you to the fridge for a beer?
No.
Business model.
Well, that just about wraps it up for another episode of Vertical Hold. Got any thoughts about broadband or flying cars or broadband on planes? Drop us a line via Twitter or the Vertical Hold Facebook page. Thanks, Anthony, for joining us for the show.
A pleasure as always, gentlemen.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. And remember, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel.